I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and the autumn leaves were dancing outside my kitchen window when my phone buzzed. David's name lit up the screen and I smiled, thinking he was calling to finalize plans for his 28th birthday celebration next weekend. "Hey, son," I answered warmly, already imagining the cake, the laughter, the family photos we'd take together, but the voice that came through was cold, distant. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Saturday." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone made me set down my coffee cup. "What's wrong, David?" "You're not invited to my birthday party." The words hit like a slap across the face. "I've decided I want to celebrate with people who actually matter in my life now." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. 28 years of birthday mornings, of pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, of staying up late to assemble bicycles and trampolines. 28 years, and I didn't matter anymore. "David, I don't understand. What did I do wrong?" "It's not what you did, Dad. It's what you are. You're just embarrassing. My friends don't need to see where I came from." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, wondering if I'd just imagined the cruelest conversation of my life. Outside, those autumn leaves kept dancing, oblivious to the fact that my world had just crumbled beneath my feet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through my empty house, past photographs that suddenly felt like accusations. There was David at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, clutching the baseball glove I'd worked overtime to afford. David at 10, proud in his little league uniform that I'd hand-washed every week. David at 18, graduation cap askew, hugging me tight and whispering, "Thanks for everything, Dad." When had everything changed? When had I become the embarrassment he needed to hide? My wife Sarah had passed when David was 12. Cancer took her slowly, and I watched my vibrant, beautiful wife fade away while trying to shield our son from the worst of it. After the funeral, it was just us two against the world. I worked double shifts at the construction site, my hands raw and bleeding, just to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I remembered the nights I'd fall asleep in my work clothes, too exhausted to change, while David did his homework at the kitchen table. I remembered selling my father's watch, the only thing of value I owned, to pay for David's SAT prep courses. I remembered the pride that swelled in my chest when he got accepted to college, even though it meant taking out loans that I'm still paying off today. "You're embarrassing." His words echoed in my mind. Was it embarrassing that I loved him enough to sacrifice everything? Was it embarrassing that I still kept his childhood artwork on my refrigerator? The man I'd raised had become someone I didn't recognize. 3 days passed in a haze of hurt and confusion. I tried calling David twice, but both times went straight to voicemail. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus at work. My co-workers noticed, but I brushed off their concerns with fake smiles and mumbled excuses. It was Thursday when my old friend Marcus called. Marcus had been Sarah's brother, and despite our complicated history after she passed, he still checked on me occasionally. "Robert, I heard something that doesn't sit right with me," he said without preamble. "About David's party." My chest tightened. "What about it?" "My daughter Jenny's invited. She mentioned it's being held at the Grand Oak Hall downtown. Pretty fancy place for a birthday party, from what I hear. Grand Oak Hall. The name hit me like lightning. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "Robert, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." My voice sounded strange, distant. "Did she mention anything else?" "Just that David's been bragging about how he's paying for everything himself. Rented out the whole main ballroom, apparently. Seems like he's trying to impress someone." After Marcus hung up, I sat in my truck outside the construction site, staring at nothing. Grand Oak Hall. Of all the venues in the city, my son had chosen that one. The irony was so perfect, it felt like the universe was playing a cosmic joke on me. You see, David didn't know that 5 years ago I'd made the biggest investment of my life. The Grand Oak Hall had been failing, and I'd bought it through a complex business arrangement, keeping my name out of the public records. It was my retirement plan, my legacy, the venue that was supposed to secure both our futures. And now my son was going to celebrate my exclusion from his life in the very place I owned. Saturday arrived like a storm I couldn't escape. I told myself I wouldn't go anywhere near the Grand Oak Hall, but by evening I found myself parking across the street, watching through my windshield as elegantly dressed people streamed through the entrance. There was David, standing by the door in a suit I'd never seen before, greeting guests with a smile that looked nothing like the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees. He looked successful, confident, completely transformed from the shy kid I'd raised. I watched a group of his college friends approach, and even with my windows up, I could hear their laughter carry across the street. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. "So where's your old man tonight?" one of them asked, loud enough for others to hear. David shrugged, that same cold indifference in his voice. "Who knows? Probably at home watching TV or something. I don't really keep track anymore." "Smart move not inviting him," another friend chimed in. This crowd would have made him pretty uncomfortable anyway. They laughed again, and I watched my son laugh with them. 28 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion reduced to a punchline for his amusement. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Other guests were arriving now, and I could see them glancing at David with admiration. Here was a young man who could afford to rent out the entire Grand Oak Hall, who moved in sophisticated circles, who had clearly risen above his humble beginnings. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew whose money had really built the life he was so proud of. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking toward the entrance. I'd spent enough time at the venue over the past 5 years to know every entrance, every hallway, every way to move unseen. The staff knew me, but I'd always kept a low profile, preferring to let the management company handle day-to-day operations. I slipped through the service entrance and found myself in the familiar back corridors. Through the kitchen's pass-through window, I could see into the main ballroom. It was transformed, elegant lighting, elaborate floral arrangements, a full open bar. The kind of party that cost more than most people make in months. David moved through the crowd like a king holding court. I watched him gesture grandly as he told some story to a captivated audience. The confidence, the easy laughter, the way people hung on his every word. He'd become everything I'd dreamed he could be, but he'd also become someone who was ashamed of the man who made it all possible. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he was, celebrating in my venue, impressing his friends with his success, while treating me like a shameful secret. I could see servers carrying trays of expensive champagne, hear the live jazz quartet I was ultimately paying for, watch my son bask in admiration for achievements built on sacrifices he'd forgotten. "Excuse me, sir?" A voice startled me from my thoughts. It was Janet, the venue's event coordinator. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Just checking on things," I said quietly. "How's the party going?" "Beautifully. The young man, the birthday boy, he seems very pleased with everything." The way she paused told me she knew. Of course she knew. I'd made no secret of being proud of my son to the staff over the years. "Yes," I said, watching David through the window. "I'm sure he is." Standing there in the shadows, watching my son enjoy his perfect party in my venue, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and constant, but alongside it grew something else, resolve. I found Janet again. "I need to speak with Tom," I said, referring to the venue manager. "Of course, Mr. Thompson, is everything all right?" Tom appeared within minutes, slightly flustered. "Robert, I had no idea you'd be here tonight. Is there a problem with the event?" "Not a problem," I said carefully. "But I want to make some adjustments." Tom looked confused. "Adjustments? The party's already in full swing. I'm aware of that." I kept my voice steady, professional. "I want you to gradually dim the main ballroom lights. Not dramatically, just slowly, over the next 15 minutes. And have the jazz quartet take an extended break. Sir, the guests will notice. They might complain. Let them notice." I paused, watching David through the service window, still holding court among his friends. "And Tom, in exactly 20 minutes, I want you to bring me a microphone. I'll be making an announcement." Tom's eyes widened slightly. In 5 years of ownership, I'd never interfered with an event once it was underway. But he'd also never questioned my decisions before. Of course, Mr. Thompson. Should I inform the birthday party host about these changes? I watched David laugh at something one of his friends said, completely oblivious to the fact that his perfect evening was about to take a very different turn. No, I said quietly. Let it be a surprise. As Tom walked away to execute my instructions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in days, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The changes started subtly. The lights dimmed just enough to make people glance around uncertainly. The jazz quartet finished their song and didn't start another, leaving an uncomfortable silence that the crowd tried to fill with increasingly nervous chatter. I watched David's expression shift from confident to concerned as guests began asking questions he couldn't answer. He flagged down a server, gesturing toward the lights, clearly trying to understand what was happening to his perfect party. That's when Tom appeared beside me with the wireless microphone. Ready, Mr. Thompson? I took the microphone, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. I'd given exactly 3 speeches in this venue over the years. Once at a charity fundraiser, once at a business dinner, and once at a memorial service for Sarah on what would have been our 20th wedding anniversary. This would be the 4th, and by far the most important. I walked through the service corridor and emerged into the main ballroom. The conversations gradually died as people noticed me. A man in work clothes and a flannel shirt, clearly out of place among the cocktail dresses and expensive suits. David saw me and his face went white. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I raised the microphone to my lips, and my voice carried clearly through the sound system I'd invested in 3 years ago. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption." The room was completely silent now, every eye on me. "My name is Robert Thompson, and I'm David's father." A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see David's friends exchanging glances, probably wondering why the embarrassing father had shown up after all. "I'm also," I continued, my voice steady and clear, "the owner of the Grand Oak Hall." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on face after face. David's expression shifted from embarrassment to shock, to something approaching horror. You see, my son decided I wasn't worthy of an invitation to his birthday celebration. He told me I was embarrassing, that I didn't matter in his life anymore. I paused, looking directly at David. But I wanted to see what kind of party was worth more than 28 years of being his father. The transformation in the room was immediate and devastating. Guests who had been admiring David's success now stared at him with a mixture of shock and pity. The friends who had laughed about his absent father suddenly found the floor very interesting. "Dad, please," David started, his voice cracking. "Please what?" I kept the microphone steady, my voice calm. "Please pretend this didn't happen. Please go back to being the shameful secret you can laugh about with your friends." I could see tears starting in David's eyes, but I wasn't finished. "I watched you tell everyone how you paid for all this yourself. How proud you must be of your independence, your success." I gestured around the elegant ballroom. "But every light in this room, every flower in these arrangements, every note from that piano, it's all built on sacrifices you've chosen to forget." The crowd was starting to move toward the exits. Not quickly, not obviously, but the subtle shift of people checking their phones, gathering their purses, making quiet excuses to their companions. David's perfect party was dissolving around him. "Dad, stop, please." David's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Everyone's leaving." "Yes, they are." I looked around at the departing guests. Funny how quickly admiration turns to awkwardness when the truth comes out. One of David's college friends, the same one who had joked about me earlier, approached hesitantly. "David, man, we should probably head out. This is really uncomfortable." David looked at his friend with desperate eyes. "No, wait. We can fix this. We can," but his friend was already backing away, car keys in hand. "I'll call you later, okay?" Within 10 minutes, the ballroom that had been full of laughter and celebration was nearly empty. Only David and I remained, facing each other across the space where his pride had crumbled. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. David stood in the middle of the empty ballroom, still in his expensive suit, surrounded by the remnants of his ruined celebration. Abandoned champagne glasses caught the dimmed light like tears. 28 years ago, I said, finally setting down the microphone. I held you in my arms for the first time. You were so small, so perfect. Your mother and I promised we'd give you everything we could. David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, but more tears kept coming. When she died, I made that promise again. Just to myself, in the hospital parking lot. I swore I'd be enough for both of us. I walked closer, and for the first time in years, David didn't step away. Every double shift, every skipped meal, every time I went without, so you could have more, I did it gladly. Because you were my son. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean you meant every word. My voice was gentle now, but firm. And maybe that's the saddest part. You looked at everything I sacrificed and decided it was embarrassing. You looked at the love that built your life and called it shameful. David's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I don't know why I said those things. I don't know who I've become. I do. I reached out and straightened his tie, the same way I used to fix his school uniform. You became exactly what I hoped you would. Successful, confident, independent. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that strength isn't about hiding where you came from. It's about honoring it. I started walking toward the exit, then paused. The venue is yours for the rest of the evening, if you want it. I've already paid for everything anyway. Dad, wait, David's voice cracked. Please don't leave like this. I turned back one last time. You're the one who left, son. I've been right here all along. That night I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring at the same autumn leaves that had been dancing the day my world changed. But something was different now. The hurt was still there. I don't think that kind of pain ever fully goes away, but alongside it was something I hadn't expected. Peace. For the first time in days, I could breathe freely. I'd spent years wondering if I'd been enough, if I'd done right by David, if the sacrifices had been worth it. Tonight had given me my answer. I'd raised a son who was capable of great things, even if he'd temporarily lost sight of what truly mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but could we talk? I need to apologize. Really apologize. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him sit with the consequences of his choices. But a bigger part, the part that had loved him through scraped knees and teenage rebellion and every milestone in between, knew that this was the moment that would define both our futures. I typed back, tomorrow, breakfast, you pick the place. His response came immediately. That diner you used to take me to, the one with the terrible coffee and great pancakes. Despite everything, I smiled. He remembered. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked older than I had a week ago, worn down by heartbreak and revelation. But I also looked stronger somehow. I'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and survived it. More than that, I'd stood up for myself with dignity and grace. Tomorrow, David and I would sit across from each other in a booth I'd cleaned pancake syrup off of 1,000 times. We'd try to rebuild what had been broken, to find our way back to being father and son, instead of stranger and embarrassment. It wouldn't be easy. Trust, once shattered, takes time to repair. But love, real love, the kind that weathers betrayal and humiliation and bitter words, that's stronger than pride, that's stronger than shame. And despite everything that had happened, despite the cruel words and public humiliation, I still loved my son. That was the one thing that hadn't changed. Wouldn't change, couldn't change. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with something more powerful, the possibility of redemption, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. The autumn leaves were still dancing outside my window. But now they looked like they were celebrating.